Tonight, the National Transportation Safety Board is investigating what caused a Soviet-era fighter jet to crash during an air show in Metro Detroit. The two people inside the MiG-23 ejected and are reported in stable condition.
Today, an investigator with the NTSB said the pilot reported a loss of engine power that they were unable to correct. But now investigators have the very tough task of figuring out what led to that loss of power.
Joining us now to break down the crash and the investigation is retired Brigadier General Doug Slocum, who spent 30 years as a fighter pilot and was a wing commander at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be here.
And so, historically, this plane, when you hear about this, what is the surprise level that something like this happened?
Well, one is just that, a MiG-23 is a notoriously unsafe design to begin with. Cold War era designed aircraft, terrible safety record, had a lot of issues. Most air forces have quit flying them. They still fly older models, earlier designs of airplanes. But that one specifically, there's not that many flying. There's some big limitations to it. The pilots knew that, very skilled pilots flying it. But, it's just one of those things. There's lots of things that could have happened to that jet.
I mean, they were clearly very skilled. You see the parachutes deploying in the video, and thank goodness nobody was seriously injured here. But can you kind of give us an idea of how fast did this all happen, from noticing that there's an issue for the pilot to deciding it's time to jump out? What kind of time frame are we talking about?
Well, the fighter pilot answer to everything is it depends. I mean, they were low, they were fast. If there's something that happened, for example, like a bird strike, it could be a very short timeline. From the time there's an impact, which could cause a catastrophic failure of the engine, there could have been something mechanical. Normally, if they have an idea, they would climb, they get slower. Didn't look like on the videos that I saw that they were doing that. So I'm thinking it was something very catastrophic on a short timeline that made them get out of the airplane. No hesitancy, and it was great that the seats worked the way they were supposed to.
Well, yes. The pilot mentioned that there was loss of engine power. What would lead to something like that? Is it the poor design and this aircraft you're talking about that's not reliable? I mean, what specifically?
Yeah, well, the engine itself could have a mechanical problem. It could throw a blade. It could have some fatigue issues or something like that. A bird going down the intake, which is a very common problem. I hate to say it that way, but yes, I mean, that could be a very strong damaging, catastrophic failure of the engine.
We've seen that on commercial flights, sure.
And a fuel line coming unhooked. All of a sudden there's a large fire. The engine could stop and everything's catching on fire. So there's a lot of things mechanically or physically that could happen to that motor. And they're not the most reliable. They've gotten better through the time, but once again, back to that short timeline of things, it looked like they made a good decision quickly, and luckily nobody was hurt on the ground.
Now, everyone loves a good air show, and like we said, this pilot was clearly very skilled. What are the qualifications, though? Who are all of the people flying these aircraft at these kinds of shows?
Well, most of the time for the air show, you're going to get the best of the best. These pilots know what they're doing. They know the limitations of the plane. That's exactly what my understanding is. In this particular case, I'm just really glad that it was a very experienced pilot flying. Yeah. Because I think that's how we didn't have any loss of life. That's how there wasn't, a lot of property damage and all as a result. So, well-trained pilots doing the right stuff, that's good.
It could take up to 2 years to get a final report on everything when it's all said and done. What goes into this investigation from this point on?
Well, the NTSB has a little different than the way they do it than we did in the Air Force. But with an engine, they can actually break down, do metallurgy. They can do amazing things with technology to tell exactly what happened, looking at all the different components. It's a very methodical look through everything, a process of elimination. And they can be very specific, and you'd be surprised. I mean, most of the time they're going to pinpoint, as we called it, that golden BB of what went wrong in that particular crash that caused that chain of events to happen.
Now, we mentioned this was a Soviet-era aircraft. Does that mean it was actually built in Russia? And if so, what kind of challenges does that present investigating?
Well, yes. I mean, most of these planes were built in Russia, just like a lot of our designs, though sometimes other countries can build them. I'm guessing in this case this was probably Russian built. But, to a lot of people's surprise, we actually flew this type of airplane secretly during the Cold War for a while. We got our hands on some. How do you have the manuals? How do you fix parts? How do you come up with ways to maintain it? And that's always an issue, and it's going to be a problem. But nowadays, there's much more prolific information out there, so they're going to be able to get the type of information that they need to figure out what went wrong with this plane.
In all your experience, have you seen something like this before? I mean, we've seen different crashes and different things like that, but for someone to walk away, two people to walk away from that aircraft, basically unharmed in a sense, not seriously injured. Have you seen this before?
Yes, I mean, the systems designed into planes now are remarkable. Not only are the planes very reliable, but then the ability to eject out of the plane, that whole violent process that happens that puts them in that parachute so that they can live. There's been a lot of time, technology, energy, and effort put into designing those in a very smart way. And then teaching the pilots how to use them, the parameters that they're allowed to pull the handles to be able to survive. So no, it's not unusual at all that pilots are allowed to, can eject out of that airplane and walk away from it.
Well, we're so happy that they did in this case. Doug, thank you so much for your insight today.
You bet. It's great to be here. I'm just glad everybody's safe. That's the bottom line with all of this.
This is retired Air Force Brigadier General Doug Slocum. Thank you again.
You bet.